You're watching Badass Ladyfolk. I'm your host, Christine Stoddard. In this episode, I'm honored to welcome Shari Hazlett. Hi, Shari.
Hi. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. So we know each other a bit from Don't Mind If I Don't.
Yes,
which
we do.
You will be directing at some point,
episode.
sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Yes, good. But you are so many other things.
Multitudes.
Yes, multitudes.
Yes.
As a performer, producer, I'll let you define yourself
Sure.
otherwise.
Yeah. So I'm a writer, director, producer, performer, theater maker, all of those things.
And how did you get into theater in high school?
Oh my goodness. I was always a theater kid.
Okay.
I started dancing when I was 4.
What?
Yes, I started dancing. I was 5. We lived in Great Falls, Montana when I was a kid. So the only kind of arts thing to do there was you could take like dance classes and stuff. So I started doing that. And
What kind of dance?
Ballet, tap, modern. And they called it jazz. But tap was my favorite. But and then we moved to Florida from Montana. Generally, they make you take like if you do tap or something, you take ballet for technique. So I started doing that. But I always loved plays and theater, and I was always putting on plays in my basement and making everyone be in my plays and getting mad when they didn't know their lines, which is ridiculous.
And these were plays that you wrote, or
some were plays that I read and found. I can't remember any off the top of my head right now. But yeah, some of them I wrote, absolutely. And then I'm trying to remember. It was like middle school. Like I started, doing more like, auditioning for stuff and things like that.
I like the hand motion that went with that.
It's very, yes, a lot more official. And then high school, I joined, in high school you can join thespians and that kind of thing. You can letter in thespians, which also is a thing.
What does that mean?
You get a letter for varsity sports.
Okay, yes, vaguely I'm aware of this.
Right. So you can also get a letter for speech and debate, which I also did, and thespians, it's National Society. That is not why I did it. But yeah, when you do thespians and stuff like that, they have like competitions and things. But and then at your school, you most of the schools, have like a theater director, program director, or something like that, and they put on productions like most schools do.
Yeah. Wait, hold on. Was the letter a T or something else?
I think it was a letter. No, I think you get the letter of your school.
Okay, great. Keep going.
That goes in, it's like, letter jacket.
On the jacket, yeah.
The letter
yeah.
jacket.
Yes,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
I was still trying to visualize this. Yeah,
Right.
Letterman jacket.
Yes, exactly.
I have one of those, yes.
Yeah. The letter is the Letterman. The letter.
Okay.
Yes.
So program director at high school.
Yeah. So what happened was, there were a series of incidents, but
there was a sigh.
and I'm not going to name names because I'm sure he still lives in Florida. He was terrible. He appeared to have an alcohol problem.
Jeez.
He would pick these plays and then cast himself in it, like in the lead roles, and it was so bizarre.
As an adult?
Yes, as an adult.
At the high school?
At the high school, he did.
No.
Yeah, and then I think it was in 10th grade, there was this one act. One of the productions we were putting up was like a series, like a night of one acts, and I wanted to direct and perform in one, and he gave us like a few that we could choose from, and I was like, well, I don't want to do. So the one that I picked was a little more, it was definitely feminist. And I remember this guy, just found it going through my old stuff at my mom's house last month. It was women waiting in the lobby for an audition, about to be objectified and talking about it.
Great.
And he thought it was terrible and didn't want to do it, and there were things. Yeah, he's like, why would you want to do that? I'm not supporting it, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
He couldn't be in it.
Right. So we did it anyways. And then, so there was just a series of things. I felt like basically the kind of theater and the kind of art that I wanted to make and the type of performance I wanted to do, I wasn't going to find in my high school. And I've always been the kind of person that's like, well, if I'm going to do the thing, I'm going to do the thing. I don't need an invitation for it, and I don't need someone to give me permission to do it. I'm going to do it anyways. And sometimes we're really lucky, and the thing that we want to do also is within like an institution that wants you to do the thing and lets you do it. But that's great when it happens, but not always. And so a few friends and I, we got together over the summer and we formed, it was called On the Brink, I guess we call it sketch teams now, but we did, it was like a review. Like we wrote all of our own shows, like an hour and a half. We did 3 shows a year. And it was, a bunch of us. And at that time we were juniors. We had a couple other folks that, things that we were thinking about as young people going to the world and music and writing our thoughts on it. Yeah, and I, on a whim, thought I would call the local Performing Arts Center to see if they would let us use their space, their black box theater space, thinking they'd be like, yeah, whatever, your children. But their artistic director at the time, Wendy Lee, she was familiar with our theater program director, who shall not be named.
But she gets a name. Wendy gets a name.
She does, yes. And she was amazing. And they agreed to let us work at the Off-Center Theater at the Tampa Bay Performing Arts Center. This was in Tampa, Florida. Working with the amazing Carla Hartley, who she could do everything. Just one of those people that is incredible. I think she's the artistic director right now at the Stageworks in St. Petersburg. But she directs, produces, writes, set design, costume, acting, produce, like lighting, everything. So she was like our person that kind of guided us, but was hands off. But it was such an incredible experience. And it's rare to even now, like all these years later, being able to really just kind of fully explore the things that you want to say and do and put them up and get that experience.
Right.
And they would have some people come in from like some of the productions they had touring that would like do workshops with us. And
wow.
It was so cool. And so, in my mind, that's what theater was. And that's like making theater, we're like 16 or 17 and, it was this thing. And unfortunately, that's not actually what it's like. That was like some crazy utopia. But the good thing is I found out the way it kind of happened organically. We were a collective. Some of us organized more, but we all were,
Wait, how many students were involved?
Well, it was definitely an out-of-school thing. So we were technically students. We had people from other schools that we knew. There were about 9 or 10 of us initially. Ooh. And then all of our shows sold out. We did like 3 show runs, like all this other stuff. And we had the grade prior to, or younger than us, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, so we were juniors. They were sophomores. Yes. Invited them to join in the last cycle of that year. It just kind of worked out that way. And so then they got folded in and that kind of stuff. And that kind of continued on. And I found out during the pandemic, because what were we doing besides sitting home and doom scrolling and looking up random things? Apparently it was around, like On the Brink lasted for like 20 plus years.
What?
Yeah.
Wait, so did you Google it?
I did.
Good for you.
And I found it, there was this group on Facebook and I connected with a couple of people. I was like, I was an original member. It was so dumb, but
no, that's adorable.
It's so adorable. They have they had a little Twitter account or whatever, and I was like, oh my god. And I found out that over the years, now they said they were a sketch team, but a lot of those folks, they went off to do comedies. Someone to Second City and all this other stuff. I'm like, that's amazing. That's so cool. So I guess though, but that very much I think shaped me in both when you're in situations that aren't ideal, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to show up to the thespian meetings. I'm going to get my letter. I'm going to do whatever. But I realize I'm not going to be able to do what I want to creatively here. I need to go make those opportunities for myself and create an environment and a space, co-create with other people, the kind of environment that we want to be in. Mm-hmm. And I think that was the other thing too, and which was great, but again, not always how it is in the real world.
Yeah, but good for you for finding that strength at such a young age and deciding to take initiative. And yes, fortunately, you had somebody who believed in you and gave you some of the resources that you needed.
We were very lucky.
And you had other young women your age. Were they all women?
No, no.
Okay.
Yeah, women, men. We had such a great, it was really great.
Other people. Good.
Everyone.
Yay.
Yeah. And then in college, so when I got to college, I realized there, and that was when I started college as a theater major, and that's what I always thought I was going to do. Even in the back of my mind, I was like, oh, I'll probably go to law school. That's my backup plan. And it was, I remember it was like my first or second semester, and I was like, why am I majoring in this? I was like, I want to do performance. I want to make theater. And what I'm doing right now is we're building sets. And I love all those things. And I appreciate, I learned how many different hammers there are and the different kinds of paint and what all the nails are and how to build a set. And that's awesome. And that is a skill that like, I am forever grateful for.
Yes.
However, but looking at the performance opportunities that were not available to me, you know, and especially, and this was before real people casting. So unless you were like very much like the ingenue or mom, there weren't even really roles for women either.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I need to do something else. For now, I feel like I'll come back to this. And that's where I took my big detour.
Okay, well, I want to hear about this detour,
okay.
which has had its benefits from what I've observed. So all this knowledge you bring from other fields. So tell me about campaigns.
Yeah. So I decided to take a year off of college. I applied for and got a fellowship at the Human Rights Campaign to basically be placed with a competitive Congress or Senate race around the country, like with some campaign or another. So I applied for that and I found out I got it, and it would have meant that, my sophomore year, I was going to be away. And so I was placed on U.S. Senator Patty Murray's first re-election campaign. And she's an incredible member. I had never really done political work before, and actually I'll tell people now, but at the time I was really embarrassed to even admit this, that when I applied, I thought I was applying for a training program. For some reason, I misread the thing. So when I felt we were just going to get training, like that it was a week-long training, I didn't know that we were going to go be placed in a campaign for several months. And so I got the acceptance packet, and this is like back when your plane tickets, like it came as a piece of paper because someone worked with a travel agent. So it came in this packet, and I know this because I just saw this at my mom's house recently because she saved everything. And I was like, why is my return ticket, like, why is it in November? I'm like, what? So I called and they're like, oh yeah, the program is X months. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know. So I did it. I was like,
can't say no at that point.
might as well, yeah. The reason I hesitated though is because I had started working for, it's called Tampa AIDS Network. It was a community-based organization. So I'd started doing like community organizing work and doing like HIV and AIDS education and, different facilities and things like that. And so I was like, oh no, what if I do this? I'm not gonna, with my job, this is like so exciting. What am I gonna do? But sometimes you just have to choose to do things.
Yeah.
They actually told me to do it. They're like, just go and do it. We'll figure it out when you come back. We can't promise you a job officially when you come back, but like, we'll figure it out. And I was like, okay.
So what do you think are some of the differences between community organizing and working on a political campaign?
I think the biggest difference is that when you're working on a political campaign, you have a very defined time period and end goal, right? You want to get a candidate elected. And I think there's often the intention of continuing the efforts that you make to reach out to the community. But when campaigns are done, you just don't have people to do that. And
right.
You kind of, it's like on the constituent, on the citizens to keep themselves engaged. So I think, doing community organizing, it's the ideal would be, you're working with the community to empower a community if, whether or not you're part of it, with, you know, resources, education, support, and that kind of thing to accomplish things together, which is deeper and longer. It's for long-lasting impact. And, you know, one could argue that, you know, political campaigns, it's like, oh, you're electing this person that's going to do that thing, but the direct impact is not often felt.
Right.
And the hours are terrible.
I was going to say, I've heard that the schedule's just brutal. You have no life. It's every weekend.
Crazy. Oh my God, it's crazy. There was one campaign, the last campaign I ever worked on. I was like just bringing my I just moved to New York, and I was a digital director for a citywide race. And I was like, okay, by the time I get home to Bed-Stuy and sleep, I have like 4.5, 5 hours of sleep. I'm like, ooh. Yeah, I was so delirious. I remember once the bus was trying to leave, and I like tried to stop it by like putting my hand in the door. Like, I was so delirious. Yeah, I like wanted the door to, I had no brain cells left because there was no sleep. And I just brought my dog to the office. He was like the office dog. He would like sit and like wait for people to give him little snacks under the table. So he was like the volunteer mascot. But yeah, those would be the biggest differences, I think, between campaigns and community organizing, or working for a community-based organization. I think that's the key. It's community. And every community needs something different.
Right.
So it takes time to do that.
How has your creative work existed alongside your campaign work?
That
was so passive. How did you make it happen? Because it was you. It was you who made it happen.
Okay. So what happened was, after I was like, I need a moment away from theater, at least not major in theater.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get some life experience. I just took this really big turn, something I always thought I was going to do my whole life, and just like it never existed, and not consciously, but really focused on, you know, community and political work and that kind of thing. And I think, I don't know. I don't know that it could have coexisted at the same time, because I was experiencing it and I was doing it, if that makes sense. And I think so much now of like when I'm writing or, you know, performing or devising or whatever, I think a lot of those things I learned and experienced and saw absolutely makes its way into my work, but also informs my point of view 100%. And I think, sure, could I have written about like, haha, the funny time on the campaign or something when I was like, sure, I'm sure I could have, but, you know, looking back, I don't think I was in a place or ready to even process it like that through art, you know, because there was the campaign work, but then, you know, I worked for community-based organizations. Tampa AIDS Network became Tampa Ills Action Plan, and I worked on this grant through the Congressional Black Caucus on it's like medication adherence for Black and Hispanic communities, and trying to improve outcomes. So a lot of that stuff was really, I learned so much and was so impactful.
For AIDS medication specifically?
It was for, basically it was like, there was a medication adherence issue in certain communities where there was higher stigma.
Right, yeah,
and so a lot of people just felt really isolated because they had to hide their medications. They weren't taking the medication regularly, and then their, you know, T cell count and viral load were not, it wasn't going well. Like their T cell count was too low and viral load was too high. So the Congressional Black Caucus earmarked funds for this pilot program to see if, well, what if people, you know, in communities that experience like higher levels of stigma with this disease, what if there was a program that established more of a social connection, a social component to it? And so we did these treatment adherence groups where people come together once a month, and we had different different groups, but the social connections they made were incredible. And part of my job as the liaison, like with the community and clinics and stuff, was to, you know, analyze the lab reports and see, and they're 100% was absolutely like an impact, because people could talk about weird symptoms or like side effects they were having, and that, you know, just having that makes it so much better. So many people, like, I remember this one guy, he was so cranky and just didn't want to be there. He was coming for he was just like, I just want to get a check. We're like, okay, guy, whatever. And then, by the end, it was like 2 years later, and he was getting custody of his grandson, and had just his whole life was complete. So those kinds of things are. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
no, it's fine. I watched Wilhelmina's War, that documentary.
No,
okay, it is about a Black family in South Carolina. There was a professor at Columbia who directed it, so that's how it got onto my radar. But it deals with all this AIDS, meds, and stigma stuff.
The stigma, and then there's also just inherent distrust of a lot of medical. The medical establishment.
I wonder why.
Right. So you're dealing with that too. But the organization I work for actually worked to directly address that by not just having a social service arm, but also path to homeownership, small business incubator, health clinics, and things like that. So you're going to clinics, you're primarily working with, Black nurses, Black doctors, and that kind of thing. Or, folks that were, versed in the community and could provide care. So those experiences are really, I don't know, it's so hard. I feel like it was weird though, because I wasn't creating at all during that time.
So how did you eventually find your way back to theater, writing, creation, art, however you want to define it?
So it was initially it was very adjacent types of things, because the work I was doing, it's social marketing, and you have to write things. And then when I started running political campaigns, I'm, writing and directing radio ads, TV spots, all that kind of stuff. So kind of applying those things, but part of me was always this is fine, but
it's not the thing.
It's not the thing.
Yeah.
And I guess I just told myself well, I guess there's no place in that for me, because my heart at the time, and definitely at the time, I'm a performer too. So when I moved to New York, I think I moved to New York at the end of the 2012 campaign cycle, and I didn't tell anyone this, but I kind of was all right, I'm going to New York and get myself established. I need to get back in that. I'm ready to do this.
Yeah.
And I was in there. I don't even know how fully conscious I was of that, but I think that was I had committed to myself to come back to it, and I always wanted to live in New York. That was for me the thing. And so, yes, I found my way back through. Did some acting classes and things like that, and then then through improv, actually. Yeah, that was my step back in, because there was one theater class I remember I took in college. My first year was called Voice Body Improv 1. And it was a lot of sitting around, being in your child state, and that kind of thing. But I remember the feeling I felt as a performer then, and just that way of getting into emotion and seeing how the audience could get very invested in something when it was really very grounded in truth and not acting. And there was one specific scene that I remember 25 years later, of course, but so for me, I'm that felt really good. That felt very natural for me. So I took a class at Magnet. I kind of found my way back in, and then I don't know, they still and then and then sketch and all this other stuff. I also through that, but that was performance focused. But that's kind of that's how that kind of happened.
Yeah, I know that you in personal conversations have talked about art and life having these different phases, right?
Yes.
And that there's not really a deadline, and that we should be open. So could you talk more about that, because it's inspiring, and I believe in those same things.
Thank you. Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I feel very strongly about, one, when you're an artist, you're creating art, you're never there's never this mastery where you figured it all out, right? It's a practice. There are always things you're learning and doing, and the learning sometimes, it's not learning your actual craft, it's other things. It's gaining life experience and things that can add to your perspective, because through art, through performance, writing, whatever your medium is, you're kind of expressing things. And again, I don't mean to impose my own my own definition of what art is or should be on other people, but
But I am asking for your opinion.
Yes, you're right.
So
Okay.
this is your episode with your name on it.
So I think, though, that everyone's on their own path. And I think, you know, whatever, number one, being an artist, that's like for us to, you know, whatever that means to us, right? And there are no rules around that. Like, being an artist doesn't mean you're a starving artist. It doesn't mean that you have to earn all of your income from art. Like, almost no artists do. That's actually very rare. But I feel like there's this main thing I think that people kind of struggle with is this idea of being like this prodigy. Oh, well, if I'm not really like amazing at it and world class by the time I'm 15 years old, then like, why bother? And it's like, but those are outliers. Those are not real things. Most people, like you would with any kind of career or any kind of practice, even like yoga, like that's a thing you work on and do. And there's some areas, I'm sure, that, you know, strengths that you really excel in, and others they take longer, or it's just the process of doing it, you know. And there's no one path, and there's no, like, even if you come back to something or start when you're 30 or 40, Lorraine O'Grady, a performance artist, photographer, who recently passed away, she didn't really start creating art or as an artist or identifying as an artist, I think, until her 40s. And that's when she started, you know, doing a lot of her work up until like her late 80s. Like, she just passed away recently. She's in her 80s. I think she had an exhibit at the Brooklyn Museum a couple years ago. So people start and do these things at any point in time. They continue it, they stop, they start. You know, you have to do what works for you, and there's no one path. And there's some actors that didn't really start doing anything until they were 40 and got, you know, landed a role in their late 40s. You know, there's any number of ways that you can come to that. So,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And it's, you can't let anyone else define it for you. And, you know, the other thing is that, like, make money, make your life easy. If you can get a day job that gives you health insurance, do it. Why? Unless, this is what I'll say. Some people have means, some people have resources, and they don't need to work, and that's great. And then, you know what? I'm so happy for you. I genuinely mean that.
Not everyone has a trust fund.
Most people do not. Most people do not. And it's also not a thing that most people talk about. So, like, you can't judge yourself by other people or where they're at or what they're doing, because you don't know their circumstances. But I know for me, knowing that, like, I have health insurance to pay for my medication, to know that I know I'm getting paid and I can pay. It's this whole layer of stress that I don't need. That's not there.
Yeah.
So I have so much more time to focus on everything else that I'm doing. You know, so performer, director. That too. That's the other thing that takes time. So
time. Speaking of which, that is all the time that we have, folks. Yes, it goes by so quickly. I'm your host, Christine Stoddard. You have been watching a conversation with Shari Hazlett on Badass Lady Folk. Tune in next time. Bye.